No. Right, need to get the screen on. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Oops. Always does that. I don't know why. Right. So, the lesson we're on today here is this varied interpretations about why MLE arose. Okay, and this takes us into the idea about language. Some languages get referred to as being living languages, others get referred to being, dead language. Like, as you recall, I used to upset Mr. Green by telling him that the Welsh language is a dead language, and off he would pop and explode at me and say, "How dare you?" Whereas English, it is probably one of the best examples of a living language that continues to thrive, to develop, to adapt, and it absorbs all newcomers. That's what makes it still a dominant sort of language globally. I mean, there's a whole variety of reasons why English sort of dominated the globe initially, but the reason it's managed to sort of keep itself to the forefront is this ability to adapt and change. And so it's about how does that come about? And this MLE, it's regarded as being an example of that. And so the next sort of question we're building towards, and this will get set probably next week, we'll be answering it, is to evaluate the idea that a person's language use is completely determined by the social groups they belong to. So that suggests then that, obviously we'll think about different types of social groups and that sort of idea. But that means then that, your language and the way that you use it is controlled basically by the groups you're in, almost like an external force here. And what I want you to do is just to sort of write down your initial thoughts. I mean, just think about the way that we've seen how this sort of youth language, because MLE is very much regarded as kind of a youth kind of language sort of thing, how that's come into being and how it's changed.
Can we use a copy over?
No. Oh, do you? I thought I'd distributed it to you. If it's not where it should be, then yes, you will. But I thought I did already distributed that to you. But you should find it in the content. Yeah. Okay. So in a way, that question is saying your language use isn't individual. If you think about it, that you have not too much control over it. So I just want you to sort of say, you just get your ideas about how you react to that straight away, because also we're going to be doing more work in this. Thank you, Oliver. What are we thinking there? What are we thinking? What I just said. What do you think? Is the way that you use language, is it determined by the social groupings?
Well, I think it's determined by multiple different things. So obviously the social group they belong to, then also possibly people they look up to. So celebrities or family members or parents or friends. And from something like where they live in their household. So if their parents speak different, that's the answer to the question.
Yeah, thank you. That was a very full answer there. Thank you very much. Yeah, that's quite good, you know. You covered a lot of ground there, so I like that. I mean, again, if you think about it, it's true. I mean, you know, we'll talk about maybe celebs and influencers a few lessons on, so I think. But yeah, you think about how some people do mimic the old kind of, and a lot of these influencers do tend to speak with, you know, a kind of almost let down with a kid's accent sort of thing. You know, they very rarely speak in what we'd regard as received pronunciation. You know, it is that sort of, you know, an edginess to the way they speak. I'm trying to think about, is that when it comes up in the Welsh TV an awful lot? Oh, what's her name? Forget. She started out apparently in one of these. It was a program about the Welsh call centre, and then she got a kind of spin off of her own. I can't remember her name now. But again, it's one of these ones that just kind of grates my nerves. And I did that class, and I'm thinking, how on earth has this person got to this, you know, stage of, you know, supposedly celebrity status, got their own program, etc. But a lot of that does happen, and then so they've got this sort of image that they project. Okay, Oliver, what about you? What do you think?
Just like I think if you do like look up to someone, like, obviously it's not complete, but as Sarah says, there's a lot of like loads of really small things that like, you know, determine like how we talk about that. But if you like really look up to like somebody or a few different people, because everybody has people to look up to, whether they be like family members, celebrities, whoever, you do tend to subconsciously, if you're really invested in like them, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You almost subconsciously start to not mimic them, but of what they say, phrases they have.
Yeah.
Even I've noticed myself, like sometimes, like I've got different people I'll go to, and I'll see something and I'll be like, oh, like,
yeah, and again, you can do it as well. I think you can hear it kind of resonating in your mind. You're thinking, oh, I mean, the classic one is that sometimes you can't just say, God, I sound like my mum and my dad, that sort of thing. We all go through that, you know. We've got those sort of things that we do and we copy. Yeah. Okay. What about you, Hannah? What do you think? What impacts on your use of language?
Different family members. My cousins, they live down near London. And then by that time I come back, my dad is kind of, you're speaking so differently. Or
Yeah. No? Yeah. Charlotte?
quite a few. I agree with that. I agree with the statement. Business social class does. And I've got people evaluate you on the way that you talk. People are going to judge you. People are going to clash you with certain groups. And it's all influenced by obviously the people around you, because when you're younger you copy and imitate what your parents do. So your first words are some of the words that you can obviously use in life. And that's basically what I put down. You use slang with the people around you, you pick stuff up. On your vowel pronunciations as well. That also kind of people around you. You don't just wake up one day and go, oh, that's how you pronounce it. You listen to people saying it.
Yeah, yeah. Good. Clem?
I feel like your influence-wise, you could talk about where you are like school-wise. So depending on how big the school is, there would be different groups. I don't know if you watched the video here from Welsh, but there's like different groups will have different ways they behave and which ways they speak. It's a bit like there are different countries in their schools. Yeah, it's like
That's a problem, because it means in a way schools are a microcosm of society, aren't they?
Yeah.
That it's a little world that we've created here, and as you say, there are those little different clusters, and depending on what your interests are, yeah. And within every year group, you'll get that, won't you? You'll get little breakdowns and little pockets of different things. I mean, listening to year 7 and 8 boys is hilarious when you're on duty out there. You know, they've got their own little world in which they talk to each other, and it gets them. Sometimes they just say one word to each other, and that's it. It's like the most hilarious thing they've said to each other. It's almost like a little code that they will have, and it's just they just fire it, and they can't stop themselves. They go, yeah, and then they like to play about with that. Going, I'm going it, but no, I'm not.
So the way that they actually talk to each other, they talk
really,
really angry.
Yeah.
Or they're really always shouting and stuff like that. Really impact how you are. Because you will go on to lots of other people. People will interpret you as an angry person.
Yeah.
Because you interpret like a really soft voice as being kind, a really loud, shouty voice as angry.
Yeah. Yeah.
And abusive language.
Yeah.
If you look at dogs and stuff like that, they don't. People think that they understand what you're saying, but they don't understand how you say it. Because you can be like shouting at your dog, but you can be talking like the nicest way. Like, I hate you. And it's like, oh my god, yes. But if you could be like shouting at them, saying like the nicest things, and they would be really scared by it.
Yeah.
How you say
Yeah.
instead of what you say.
Yeah. Good. Yeah, thank you. Libby?
Basically the same thing.
That's a bit boring, isn't it?
I think as well, definitely school, just like general.
That's the initial kind of influence, yeah?
It's like, I know that in my old school, people there, like, no one dramatically different, but there was definitely different groups in my old school than there is here. I'm sure it's the same for every other school.
Massive big because when I was with you, spoke to like towns and Welshies.
Yeah.
People from the hills that spoke fluent Welsh, all the parents at home and everything, they were the Welshies, like the farmers.
Yeah.
And the towns, some people who didn't speak Welsh, they couldn't speak Welsh, but they didn't speak Welsh at home, they were like,
Yeah, I mean, human beings love to subdivide and categorize, don't we? We love to label groups of people, or they're that type of people. They belong to that, you know. And again, then with that, there goes a hierarchy, there goes an elite, all those sorts of things. Do you want to know something that's going to really blow your mind? That's going to make your mind just go poof. Sorry, was that Clem? Yeah. Your language and the way that you use it is as unique as your DNA.
So I'll be able to tell you that last message off your phone.
Yeah, well, things like that. I mean, it is those things. But everybody, although we will all belong to different types of groups and you say social classes, and in a way, what this question kind of hints at and gets at as well is this idea about code switching in a way, isn't it? That human beings recognise the environment that they're in, and human beings recognise that a certain language, a certain level of communication has to be done within a certain group. And then when they go to another one, they know that they have to change it again. That sort of thing. And it's interesting that you say that about school, because you think about it, a teacher can face classes from year 7 in secondary school up to year 13 in a day, sort of thing. depending on the timetable sort of thing, where you wouldn't teach those children all in the same way. And you'll recognise that yourself as you're growing up, the way that you see is about how teachers are different with you as you get older and that sort of thing as well. And that's what human beings are like. They consciously adapt all the time. And so it's able to sort of evolve and change. And we've all got little parts of our life. We've got the way that we're talking at home within the family. We've got the way that we talk with our friends. We've got then other interests that we might have, other social groupings. Then as you grow up, it's into the workplace. And of course, there is the other big one. Well, again, it becomes more complex now, but there is the way we look at, the divide of language between gender. Is there a difference between male and females in the way that they speak and the way that they use language. So all of these things begin to sort of impact upon it. And then we get these things, and just when they thought that they had it all nicely, neatly sort of pigeonholed and compartmentalised, you thought, well, yes. And obviously one we've kind of talked about here a little bit, but we haven't sort of fully focused on, is that sort of cultural impact upon the way that you use language and how language evolves in English as well. It used to be that you could think, right, this is one distinct cultural impact. But with what was defined as being multicultural London English, when it began to evolve, this kind of changed things radically, because suddenly culture, ethnicity as such, wasn't a driving force in the way that this language was created, the way that it was spoken, and how that it was used, because it cut across everything. But yeah, language and the way that you use it, we've all got, it's all as unique as your fingerprint. It's your kind of linguistic thing. We've got a unique linguistic fingerprint. Okay, so we're now about to have a nice. Before we get to the academic paper sort of thing, look, I've got a nice gentle way. Who knew? I didn't realise this, but who knew that the One Show had covered the rise of MLE? Yeah, that was my reaction to it when I saw it. I thought, what? And I looked at it, I thought, it's actually pretty good, and it ticks the boxes, and it does give us this idea of how it comes about. Now, obviously, we had David Stark in the last lesson ranting about how it was the end of civilization as we knew it, because we have all these white people speaking in this uneducated way and talking like these people, and just being criminals and being thugs, and it's the language of the gangster and everything. Here we find he's a million miles off the mark. This is a lot closer. And again, the person who presents this, because they always, in the One Show, they always have the little guest presenters doing their little slot. It may surprise you. I did a bit of digging around. I think he actually did a linguistic degree before he became the well-known comedian that he is. Because he talks so well about it. But again, the beauty is that because he can mimic, he does all the voices too, which is great in different accents. So we'll better change this so that we can see.
The One Show is so weird. It just kind of like pops up on your TV guide, doesn't it?
It does. And the topics it covers are so random. I said, listen, I thought, no. And I looked at it and I thought, oh, yeah, it works. It's good. That's if it's not going to buffer away here. Hang on. I might have to go into just my alternative route, I'm thinking, because it's been very annoying. Hang on. Right, let's get rid of that, because it doesn't seem to like. It's not responding at all. Right, so back to the OneNote. It's going to do anything. Oh, God, I got 3 of them are going to doing that. Come on.
I tried to to like a webinar yesterday afternoon, but I had to watch it on replay at home because it wouldn't
Is it always the afternoon, this? Let's try and do it. Oh. What is going on? Next, really? Skip ads.
Okay, now Alistair McGowan has been on a road trip of his own, looking at different accents from all around the UK.
Let's pause you for a minute so I can get them. Too happy with it. Let's. Why is that buffering so much? Let's try it a different way. Let's try it a different way. Favorite is.
These are the Verbo holiday homes, waiting for you to fill with your family. You're together.
Okay, now Alistair McGowan has been on a road trip of his own, looking at different accents from all around the UK.
On his latest journey, he goes in search of Cockney, but didn't find it. Well, you might expect him to.
The East End of London is home to an accent that's famous all over the world.
The East End has given us film stars like Michael Caine, film stars like Don Cotton, footballers like David Beckham, style icons like David Beckham, underwear models like David Beckham.
But the Cockney accent is now under threat from a new kid on the block. Accent expert David Hornsby knows all about it.
So David, here we are in the heart of the Cockney East End of London, but we're not going to be hearing that much Cockney today, are we? Is that right?
No, we're going to be hearing the new accent of the East End. It's called MLE, or Multicultural London English.
No, you're so we porky pies.
Straight up.
Straight up? Right, we better scarper.
MLE is the voice of young London.
Originally from Stratford, and I've been on Hackney for about 11 years now.
When I was little, because I never used to go out, I used to talk about Cockney like my mum and dad. And then when I started going out and like mixing with other people, then I had that youth dialect that they say now.
Listening to the way that you're talking, it's like, I know it's because it's casual in the relation I'm called Dudanet, but it's like it's going through the back of the mouth.
How we speak now, it's just more relaxed.
That doesn't actually sound as well the way you speak now. It's very different from there.
Yeah.
MLE is spoken by people from all ethnic backgrounds, and its influences are also multicultural. It's a mix of sounds from places as diverse as the Caribbean, Greece, Asia, and Africa.
One difference I'm hearing is that I would have expected like the M's, like West End, for there not to be H's.
No,
but
H dropping is on its way out.
Hackney, who's from Hackney, H's are back.
Yeah.
Let's celebrate the H. H's are back, everybody.
The speed of MLE's progress is astonishing. Charlie speaks MLE, but his mum is Cockney through and through.
How, for instance, would you say something like, they all have a different style of talking, don't they?
They all have a different style of talking, don't they?
Charlie?
They've all got a different style of talking.
I don't finish the words when they're talking. So you have to try and pick up what they're saying, and that's what I feel we have to do nowadays.
The fact that it's changed something within one generation is quite extraordinary, almost alarming, isn't it?
I wouldn't say alarming, I'd say it's exciting.
What really surprises me, though, is the shape of the mouth to produce that accent has changed so much. The whole thing has gone from the front of the mouth, like when Debbie talks, to the back of the mouth when Charlie talks, and that is quite extraordinary, isn't it?
A lot of Cockney vowels are diphthong. The tongue has to go on a little journey, whereas multicultural London English vowels are much more likely to be monophthong, so you keep your tongue still. So play becomes big.
I can hear when Debbie's talking, there's a lot more movement of the mouth than when Charlie talks and when the girls are talking. It's all that thing that goes out the back. So, if the new sound at the East End is MLE, what's become of Cockney? Since the end of World War II, many Cockney speakers have been leaving London. We're going to Kent to find the accent we used to hear within the sound of the Bow Bells, the traditional home of Cockney.
The most popular thing is the bread pudding, which is made with custard as well. We make it and then pour custard around it.
Charlotte is Kent born and raised, but she's grown up surrounded by Cockneys.
Where I'm from on the Isle of Sheppey, there's many people that have brought the London accent over to us, many people saying words that have come from London, which do catch on.
David, Charlotte's accent does sound very much like Cockney, doesn't it?
There's TH fronting, so with, and month, which is something that London would do. A lot of glottal stops too, but, it, so on. Again, all of those things you hear in London.
With so many Cockneys in Kent, what's happening to the county's traditional accent? The Kent accent is slowly dying out, but John Phillips, who spent his working life as a farm manager, retained some traditional inflections.
Worked on the land all my life, during the war as a schoolboy. I worked on the farm, doing odd jobs, working the horses.
I think a lot very interesting and unique sounds of horses, the Irish roll, farm, farm. These are all typical sounds of the Kent accent.
What's particularly interesting about John's speech is that all vowels are in a different place.
So what happens to something like Queen?
That seems to shorten, nothing comes to Queen.
You've got to test that out. Who celebrated her Diamond Jubilee last year, John?
That was Her Majesty. that of course was the Queen, and I have met the Queen personally, shaken hands with her.
Her Majesty the Queen, as she would now be known. The rise of MLE in East London and the spread of Cockney into Kent is accent evolution in action. This is how accents are changed and created. It's an incredibly exciting time to be exploring accents in this country. So, we're next in Bravier. Jimmy.
Good film analysis here, of course, Alex. Very complicated. Fascinating film. We've already talked about this before we came on the air. Is there a blueprint? Is there, if that's a what or a who for MLE, where this MLE comes from?
Well, it's been happening over a number of years now, but that's the exciting thing, is that it's such a fast-spreading accent. But it didn't really come from any one person. I suppose maybe Ali G was the first time we heard that on the media, and people were aware of this phenomenon, who perhaps didn't live in these areas. And I suppose in terms of sport, you've got somebody like Rio Ferdinand, probably is perhaps the most high-profile person who has that, something like that, as a sort of accent like that. And maybe Plan B in the world of music has it, but we haven't yet heard it used, in terms of like newsreaders or presenters. We're not getting MLE in that sort of area yet. Maybe we will one day.
And Amir Khan is like a melting pot for all of it. He's pretty good to explain what's going on within there.
Well, yeah, because it's not just a London thing. Obviously, the ethnic influence is happening in cities around the country. So Glasgow as well, and places like Bradford and Bolton, where Amir Khan, box art. If you listen to him talking, he'll be talking about the way that he fights and that, and you can hear it when he's talking about the way that he fights. You can hear the Bolton, but you can also hear the Pakistani as well. So it's a mixture. But it's exciting that this accent is happening.
To the older generation, it's great, isn't it?
I can't do accents.
He can help you. I know what you can do, but you win an Oscar, you're fine with that. It's all right. But it's almost like Amir Khan doesn't know where he's from, to the older ear, but of course that's not the case at all.
No, absolutely not. It's just a new thing, and as we said in the film, Cockney is being eased out a little bit, but the Kent accent therefore is being squashed. It's a fascinating to see the sort of geographical process. But there's some fascinating features in Old Kent, as the man there, John, in the film displayed. At one point he said "during," something that we call yacht dropping. And yacht dropping is something that you do as well, Alex.
Oh, really?
Yes, you drop your yacht.
That's why she was hired, by the way.
But yes, yacht dropping is a very interesting. That's not the sort of thing that a bird watcher would necessarily fancy. It sounds like you would want to saw some great yacht droppings the other day. But the yacht is the sound, you probably know this, Jeremy, is the yacht sound. This is what phonetics people call the yacht sound. So in Welsh, for instance, you drop your yachts all the time. So a word like perpendicular would become perpendicular. So that is
which
missing.
is very it does. South Walians do. And they say things like they say things like documents rather than documents.
But that doesn't necessarily happen in MLE, which is the accent we were highlighting.
But what about the TH fronting? What does that mean?
TH fronting, we heard that in the film. That's when THs become Fs, and that's again is the phrase that phoneticists and linguists use for that. So it's third, you say third. That's TH fronting. Third. But that happens in both the new accent, MLE, and also in traditional Cockney. It's like, yeah, third came third. But it's a math movement which is interesting, that the old Cockney voices, you know, if you're a taxi driver and get a taxi home tonight, he'll probably be talking like that. There's an awful lot of math movement going on like that, you know, and someone like Mickey Flanagan, who we all know from TV, you know, Mickey's from the East End of London. You don't get many people move the math more than what Mickey does.
That's very cowboy as well, isn't it?
It is, and Mick Jagger as well, similarly. But yeah, the MLE, I don't know if it's a drummer, isn't it, really? Mickey Flanagan, Mick Jagger. Yes, but this is the thing with the new accent. I don't know if it's a teenage thing, whether they move their mouth less, because a lot of people do, and you know, teenagers. But young Charlie that we heard in the film, though, you know, he hardly moves his mouth at all, and that seems to be one of the things about it.
What about that thing when everything goes up at the end, like the Australians, that all the kids seem to do now?
Yeah, that's that absolutely horrifies me. It's just a rising inflection. But I think that's come from American, and I mean, there are influences in MLE from American as well, a little bit, I suppose. So it's a street accent which is just forming all the time. And what's interesting is the words as well, the words that they're using. It's a dialect as well as an accent. And they change. The lad in the film there, Charlie, he said to me, he said, yeah, I used some of the words for like a couple of weeks, and I think, no, that doesn't suit me no more. That's gone out of fashion. I don't use that word no more, you know. But it's always happened, 20s and 30s, you think about it, you know, people would always say, oh, that's jolly good, or it's simply wonderful, it's simply marvellous, oh, that's too divine.
Absolutely super.
Yeah, absolutely super. But in those days, probably Victorian parents or grandparents are thinking, have you heard the way these children talk today?
They were horrified.
Yeah, and similarly, Cockney rhyming slang, you know, that's something now we look back on as very charming. But some parents, like the parent who tried there in the film, Debbie, she was very concerned about the way her son talked, what effect it will have maybe on his job opportunities in the future. But Cockney rhyming slang, we look at it as charming, was invented at the time so that people could talk to each other in slang and in argot and not be understood by their parents and also by police. You know, a lot of it was criminal activity. They invented these words like apples and stairs, so no one knew what they were talking about. So that in its time had its own connotations. Accents and languages have always been invented, and this is a very, very exciting time.
We could listen to you all night about this, and we wish we had time. Just before we start.
I thought we did.
You know, well, we do. Unfortunately, the beef is done. But so just let's speak about the evolution of Beckham's confidence through his voice.
Well, yeah, there was a thing this week about confidence and about Beckham's accent changing. And, you know, as I said about teenagers, this might be one of the reasons why this accent is through the back of the mouth. But Beckham, when he started off, you know, he used to talk more like that, and he was a very shy sort of person. And I think what's happened to him recently, it's been picked up in the papers this week. Not that his accent has changed, but he's just matured and he's grown more confident. So when you grow more confident, your mouth opens more, you ease up, so you don't sound shy. But it's the same voice, it's the same accent, if you like, but it's just gone from being quite tight.
So if he gets more confident, where's he going to end up?
We'd end up sounding like Jeremy.
Yay!
I think I think it's quite a good one, because it really does give this kind of evolution and how things came about. So let's see how closely you were paying attention there. So we've got what is MLE, which is, as you know, what does that stand for? MLE means multicultural, yeah.
Have you seen them videos, like I'm not recommended next to it? I've watched a few of them, they're really interesting. I watched the Alex Turner one, like Learn English with Alex Turner.
Yeah, there's one off that I've got another one who we're going to, another sort of a professor we're going to talk about, Rob Drummond, who will introduce you to the world of MOOB, because they say, oh, there's multicultural, and it's Alistair McGowan was mentioning there, says, well, this isn't just a London thing. You know, he says the youth in Glasgow and Liverpool, Birmingham, all over the place, Bradford, they're all speaking. It is a kind of a youth thing. And so what Drummond thought about, there's something in this, surely then. And he went off, and what MOOB is multicultural urban English. And it's just that idea, it's to do with the city setting. So what accent has that basically replaced in London? What is that knocked out of London? The Cockney. So that has replaced in its time Get me a little arrow in. Dum, dum. So it's pushing out the Cockney, which is from your east end of London, and it's sorry. Yeah, Danny Dyer. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Danny Dyer type of guy who did it. And in turn, what has happened then to the Cockney accent? Where has it migrated to?
I don't know, but I really realised recently that you pronounce your R's. We don't.
You've only now realised that I roll my R's.
There we go, it's gone.
Thank you. You've only realised that happens.
Yeah, and Irish people as well.
No, you don't say.
You're Charlotte. Like, no, that was Irish. Say my name.
Charlotte.
Yeah, I can hear the R now, whereas when I say Charlotte, I don't hear the R.
Yeah, I see now. So I say right. So I say Charlotte. You say it. Your name.
Charlotte.
Yeah. So it's more that E. Yeah. Right, well. But yeah, it is a Celtic thing. Rolling of the R's. Yeah. 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 Exactly. So. So the Cockneys get pushed out of London, and where did it pitch up? Where's it gone to? It was said in that VT, as they said.
Essex.
No, just along from Essex.
I thought they said Kent.
It's Kent. Yeah.
I always look at maps and think, oh, it's actually places are so much further away.
Yeah.
It's just London's not that far.
No, I don't know. No. Basically, I was watching a good at Charlotte when I was younger. I know Spencer and Penny. Spencer was moving to Denmark, and she's like, oh, it's only 3 hours. It's only 3 hours away. So I was like, oh, she can just drive over to America and see what's its own country. So it's like a 3-hour flight.
What would have been the original accent in Kent then?
Well, you had that chap that they were interviewing, wasn't it? You know, who's about farmer, and again, I suppose these things we could think about it. It sounds a bit of what we regard maybe as being sort of West Country. It's got that same kind of birth to it. It's that very rural sort of country accent that we see it is being defined. Will you behave yourself now? I'm going to get Penny to make comments about this when she's listening back to the recording. But so you can see here that language is it's like dropping a pebble in a pond, isn't it? You know, that sort of sense of diffusing out, you know, the ripple effect going out. So this new accent dialect comes in. It in turn pushes out what was once there before. And it goes to find a new sort of home, and it finds it in a kind of neighbouring county, you know, just outside of sort of Greater London sort of thing. But in turn, the native accent of Kent there, and it means that some accents will eventually get lost if that kind of carries on, because you know one's got to get supplanted and removed, and it might have nowhere to go because language needs people to speak it for it to survive. Yeah, if you don't speak it, it will die out. Yeah, but I mean, it's a meant, I suppose, sort of actively. I mean, I suppose if you look at it, that's why. I mean, it's had a revival now more recently. Welsh, amongst young people especially, it's had a revival, but it's not a whole nation that speaks it. You know, you don't have a whole nation that speaks Cymraeg.
It's because they're all arrogant people. Nobody wants to live in Welsh.
Well, there's that, and it's because as well that.
No, I didn't mean that offensive.
No.
You're like, no, I'm not saying that. No way.
But it's also because variations of English have done. I mean, again, you think where we're right in the Welsh-English border, yeah, and so there's always going to be that battle between the languages where you've got that sort of boundary, and one will eventually win out, and and it's going to be just because of the sheer volume of population and people who cross the border on a daily basis, let's say for work, etc., and that sort of thing. And then your natural population will again diffuse out because they go off to universities outside of Wales, elsewhere, where you're not going to be speaking Welsh. So the only time they'll speak Welsh is when they come back to their home. That's right, and that's why it won't become dominant, because it's not got the force or the momentum. Yeah.
Like when I speak Welsh, I don't care if people can speak it, because when I speak Welsh, nobody can understand.
But again, that takes you back to why these language kind of evolves and changes. As you were saying there, you know, the whole thing about Cockney in the East End of London came about. It was for the criminal fraternity. It was for gangs to have a common language so that they could arrange things between themselves and nobody else would know what was going on. But then it's one of these things. It became popular. And so just the general population began speaking in Cockney, and it so no longer became this exclusive, and so people would understand what was going on. And so they thought, well, we've got to change something else, and we're going to move on to something else. And that's why that came about. But it's just one of these amazing things about how language can do this. And one will begin to sort of push out the other. And eventually, if, you know, say, there'll be sort of, if you go into any county, there'll be regional sort of variations that you only have archival material of. I mean, again, that's what the British Library's been very good at. I mean, it's created this audio record of all the different sort of regional dialects, patterns, accents that existed. And if you went back to, you know, just at the turn of the century, I think you can go into the British Library archives online, and you can listen to these when you just pop around the maps geographically, you know, and it'll give you that kind of classic, you know, accent from that place. There's an audio clip that they've got from it, and it does show you how dramatically English as it is spoken has changed in a relatively short space of time. But English is the master at doing this. I say it's almost like communion, like amongst languages. It will adapt, change, and it will always take on new things. And the new things will tend to get driven from the young upwards. I mean, I think which is so true, isn't it? That thing about with the multicultural London English is that there's very little movement of the mouth. You know, and again, that's when they talk about, you know, it's coming from the back rather than the front.
You always say that about Harrison. Harrison actually
it's so hard, isn't it, to think. Because as you say, it's almost like the classic kind of ventriloquist dummy act, isn't it? With that's in it, but the lips.
That's why they're also good at it. That's why they're also good at what's it called?
That is true. But as you say, and you think in a way, isn't it? You think. It seems like an awful lot of hard work. You think, gosh, to project that from the back, because it's all coming from the back of the throat. That is because, again, it's a shame we've not got Penny here. But I mean, again, you must think about it when you're doing your Welsh. You're aware of how your mouth shapes words. You know, and that's why we sometimes find speaking in a foreign language difficult, because you're having to use the muscles round your mouth. You know, if you were to say, right, speaking Spanish or speaking French, you know, that idea, because you're having to put your mouth into shapes that you're not used to doing when you're speaking your native language.
Is that why some people can't go?
Yeah, because it's the muscles that are there. You use them because we learn our language from what they call it's your primary caregiver, your parents. That's where we all learn language from firsthand. And so we tend to mimic that. That's where we get a speech pattern. And that will tend to be reflected in the schools that we go to too. They'll speak in the exact same way, sort of thing. And so your mouth gets used to doing this shape, this formation, the tongue to be in a certain place in your mouth to produce certain sounds, certain vowel structures, those sort of things. But then you go into a foreign language like French, German, Portuguese, Spanish, whatever, and you suddenly think, oh, you're very conscious of what you're doing with your mouth. Yeah. And it's almost like your tongue doesn't know where to go, behind the teeth, at the side of the teeth, to the back of the throat, or whatever. And you get all tongue-tied and you stumble over words, all those sorts of things. That's what's going on there. It's that whole process. Yeah.
I think it's so cool. Like, I think it's quite exciting, isn't it?
I've never thought about
But yeah, no, when you think about it, it is something, it is really, really complex, but we all take it for granted that we can do it. And then new things come along. And again, it's when the new things come along, you think, and it tends to be the old guard who will say things like, you know, that's a sort of really slovenly way to speak, because isn't it, you hear that thing about opening your mouth, enunciating clearly, shaping your vowels, you know, having clear diction, all those sort of things. Youth speak always tends to go against that. And it will be, as McGowan again, because he's mimicking. He was great at doing that, wasn't it? You know, it's out the side of the line sort of thing. You know, that, and I could say, or he hardly remembers it. I said, you know, the guy, and when you look at the VT again, you saw that the guy's lips were hardly moving when he was talking. You know, you just thought, whoa, how is that being done?
Kind of like, it's weird because some of the people where I work, like, it's weird, it's old.
Yeah.
And again, to point out, like, they don't talk much anyway, but the ones who do talk, they're kind of really, because they don't move their mouth much, they don't really move much at all. They find it so hard to like get the words out, and you have to really listen because it's more like.
Yeah, and it isn't it. Yeah, good point. I mean, it's also, isn't it? Is that because, and again, it shows you how much we as humans rely on that movement of, and again, you think about it, lip reading. You think about a lip reader trying to deal with multicultural London English. They would be stuffed, wouldn't they? Because there is so little movement, because you look for that shape and formation so you can actually work out the word that's being spoken. And again, it shows you that kind of, you know, that cue that we take as human beings, all these things that are going on to help us understand. And again, it would be all about as well, isn't it? Knowing when to jump into a conversation. We take all those verbal cues from each other. We look at each other when we're talking, because we know that we get signals from the eyes as well. All those sort of kind of subliminal messages that we're on, saying, aha, you've paused, so I can now come in. It's my turn to talk. I mean, that's how we don't overlap and all that sort of stuff. It takes place. But with these sorts of accents arising, all of that kind of concept gets thrown out. Yeah. It makes it trickier to understand. So the question is, how has this come about? Is it just all artifice? Is it, as you know, the sort of the extreme David Starkey view is that it's just white folk trying to imitate black folk? Is that what it's about? And it's got sort of, you know, strangely sort of twisted into this bizarre sort of dialect, or is there something else going on at it? As you can imagine, there's been lots of academic research on this, and they actually began to work out how these things were coming about here. And again, if we focus on what's in the red box there, how can we describe these new ways of speaking? How did they come into existence? We're clearly talking about new contact varieties, though in doing so we're inevitably idealising because they are less homogeneous than either dialects or sociolects are assumed to be. And they are, in any case, to varying extents, context bound, and to the extent that they are youth languages, transient. That said, within any one location, these varieties are recognisable to local people, and even if practices are uncertain. For example, the German term, Kiesdeutsche, neighbouring German, who knew I could speak Germany, was first used and printed by Weiss, adapting a term used by speakers referring to multi-ethnic youth language in Germany. And from this academic usage, it was subsequently taken up by the media. On the other hand, the term Jaffakin, used to refer to youth language in multi-ethnic parts of London and beyond, most likely has media origins and is strongly associated with hip-hop. It is likewise not essentially a members concept. Young people preferring the word slang to characterise their way of speaking. The term, I cannot even go anywhere near that one. It's Swedish, referring to the Swedish characteristics of multi-ethnic districts of Stockholm, was named after one such district, Rinkeby, shows a third pattern. So it's an academic coinage in all three countries, though the language varieties and the labels are to differing extents part of public discourse. Now here you can see it comes about that these terms get given because of geographical location. It's everybody, and as we've got here, you know, it's that idea about multicultural London. So geographical setting seems to be important.
People like moving like abroad in different places, and that it's getting more and more. And more
yeah.
happens, the more accents get.
And that just funnily enough, a little bit further down, that's exactly what they began to see, because they saw, wait a minute, you've got your native speakers, and then you would have immigrant population come in and join, and the immigrant population wants to assimilate into the geographical location that it's going into. It wants to be part of it. How do you become part of it? Well, you've got work, but you also want to sound like those around you. You want to sound like those and speak like them. And so they pick up the language as a second language.
That makes sense to why some borders, like in past years, they've sounded really, really American when they speak English.
Yeah.
That's it.
American English because of the people that they've been around with.
That is it. Boom, you got it in a nutshell. Brilliant. And if you listen to the board to see as well, you think about how they're picking up our language. And so sometimes they will use a word in a strange way. Yeah, like Stuart would be a great example, won't it?
The only average understand is obviously like, you can understand Chinese people, but English people live today, and the way that his like English sounds compares to how it did at the very beginning.
Yeah.
I was literally in a group with him on like one of the first days in year 9 with Miss Cunliffe, and I was struggling to communicate what like lesson was.
Yeah.
And now it's like.
Yeah. Well, now I noticed he was writing on the car of one of the staff there, because it was the window was all sort of steamed up because it was misty and rainy and all that stuff, and he'd just written on it, "Welcome." He didn't realise that I was watching him do it, and then when he finished doing it, he turned around and he saw me in my car and he went, "Oh." But I mean, it is that way, and because you think about it, you think of the inflection and the words that our international students use English as a second language, and it's that way. I mean, if they were here long term, something would evolve.
They tend to speak English better than us.
Well, because they'll tend to go along with the grammatical rulings and the grammatical usage. And again, especially if you think of the Spanish, and again, Penny would be here to back this point up, sort of thing. You know, they come from that language which is heavily regulated by grammar, and they've been taught that since they've grown up, sort of thing. Whereas in English, grammar is now a lot more fluid. It's discreetly taught, not explicitly taught as such. And so they're used to that sort of rich grammatical background, and they will then apply that to the second language that they learn, and so they'll abide by the rules and the regulations. Whereas we all as native speakers, we bend, we adapt, we change to suit our needs.
Is that how they can always tell them, like say you were in France and like I spoke fluent French second language, which I didn't. But imagine like if I was there, they'd be able to tell. You'd think that I wasn't native because I learned it.
It could.
If you spoke Welsh to me now, I'd be able to tell 100% you can't speak it. It's the way you pronounce it, like I'm trying to think of an example.
Yeah, you're well to point. And even if you become a fluent speaker, you know, I suppose it would be like the French linguists that maybe pick up and things, think, I'm detecting a bit of a Welsh or an English inflection there, which might begin to give you away. But because they're trained and they've studied, it would. Because again, just like France, just like the UK, you know, the way that French is spoken in the north of France is completely different to how it is spoken in the south of France. You know, in Paris, it's different to the likes of, you know, other big cities like Marseille, that sort of thing as well. And again, you've got the cities versus the rural divide. So they've got that sort of breakdown of their language just like we have as well. And so, I mean, again, if you were kind of like, they might just think it's a strange, you know, regional accent that you've picked up. And they might think, oh, you obviously come from the north or wherever, that sort of thing. And it is that idea. That when it comes in, the two languages will kind of conflate, and eventually what happens is that the native speakers begin to sort of join in with the newcomers, hence you get this new hybrid language coming out, this regional variation, which then becomes very specific to that section. But what has been interesting in the academic studies was that they noticed this wasn't just in the UK, this is not just English.
It's very good to speak Welsh as well. My Welsh is completely different to your Welsh. But we've not come up with the Welsh, but we now speak Welsh that we both understand.
Yeah.
Like a common
yeah. So it's Freya more Mid Wales.
She's like
Yeah.
So her Welsh is like south.
Yeah.
Would it ever go to the point then where, so say hypothetically, say that half of of Italian France was non-native but fluent,
Mm.
and half of them were native. Would it ever get to the point where the non-natives would perfect the language so much that they would start to kind of blur the lines, or would it always stay that, you know, the natives kind of bend it so much you'd always be able to tell the difference?
No, what you would probably expect to see, and it takes time obviously for this to happen, but you would eventually expect that the two sort of dialects that exist within the one geographical area to begin with, over time they would merge, and so the two originals would eventually disappear and be replaced by this hybrid of the two, this meshing together, so that they then become one unified grouping. They're no longer different.
And then more non-natives come in.
And again, that's how it just evolves, yeah. That's exactly the way it works. And again, I think we've had that conversation a couple of times with various people, I think. Again, that's the whole thing about new towns and how sort of accents that got applied to them grew up, because new towns were pulling from all different geographical areas, and so you'd have those different regional sort of dialects on the go and accents sort of thing taking place. But eventually, over time, you know, the new town would want its identity, you know, to be known as, I come from here, that is my hometown, and so all of these would eventually begin to blend, and so something new would evolve out of it. And you think for a language to do that, that is pretty remarkable. That is pretty profound, you know, and that shows how you know, there is a language that will never die out because it's continually adapting. Yeah, really. But here we can see that obviously this urban setting is something that's key across you know, again across Europe as well. You know, it's different countries had the exact same thing. The Jaffican though was a thing where it was the media that gave this label, because they sort of, and again it's that one, probably some journalists thinking, oh, I'm going to make a pun here because it's the Jamaican and the African. How can I conflate those two words together? What can I come up with? That one, and it just went into a few headlines, and also in the tabloid press sort of thing, and it stuck, and it took hold, and that's how it can. And whenever it was used, though, it's used as a sort of derogatory term. You know, that is used in the way that David Starkey was talking about it in his interview. Yeah, people who spoke that, they were seen to be ill-educated, basically feral, you know, on the cusp of, you know, criminal, you know, activities and a bit gangsterish, that sort of thing. They all, and again, all the stereotypes that went with it. They all listen to rap music, you know, they're all smoking God knows what, that sort of thing. Hello, Nathan. No, you know, you've also left it somewhere else, haven't you? Yeah, you did that. Yeah. Yeah. That Jaffican, it became the new kind of shorthand. You know how folk used to refer to people as being chavs, yeah. That Jaffican, it had the same kind of label going with it, you know, and it was derogatory in that respect. Yeah, I mean, it's not as used as much as it used to be. I mean, going back, what? Chavs is a kind of 80s thing going into the 90s. That was a big one. And what did chavs have to wear? Trackies. Had to have trackies. Shell suits. That was their big thing. Shell suits, yeah. Sorry? Yeah.
Conversation I had with Kristen last year, trying to explain what a Roman was.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. And I suppose that. And that Jafkin as well. I mean, it did tend to be. It was a term that was used by the older generation, you know, sort of looking down at, and those who thought they were protecting English as we know it, safeguarding it. It's what do we call it? The quality of the spoken word and protecting all those sort of grammar rules and about English being spoken properly and being understood around the world, sort of thing. They saw this new youth speak as a way of as an attack on standard English, and it was a denigration of standard English.
But you think though, like, surely if people like, you know, love English as a language, surely something they should understand, embrace, but at least understand, is the fact that the reason English is so amazing and such a big language is because it's so adaptable and changes so much. But I don't get why.
Yeah, no, I mean, I suppose it depends which way you fall, what side of the argument you fall on. So I think, as you saw, the guy in the linguist that was with Alistair McGowan, so I think, you know, he said, you know, it's exciting, and it was because it's like a brand new language coming into being, and it's like these things, isn't it? I mean, it's like, you think about it, certain words, you know, to coin a phrase, go viral, don't they? Everybody uses it for a while, you know, the short phrase, the, you know, whatever, it's a term that is used, and then it might just disappear. Others, though, stay and stand the test of time, and it goes on. This multicultural London English will eventually be replaced by something else. Something else will come along because it'll be driven by youth.
It's very common to see younger generations changing the way they speak, because like Cockney was changed, so parents didn't know what they were talking about.
Yeah, well, do you know one of the reasons why it did come about as well? Weirdly enough, multicultural London English as well is driven by an educational thing as well. Because it began to be, and we'll see when we look at Drummond, but he began to notice that it wasn't just London, but it was across Britain as a whole. So he went for, it was urban dialect here, it was a multicultural. And he said that, you know, you could basically take a youth from London, pop them into Birmingham, pop them into Glasgow, Bradford, whatever, and he would be able to fit in because he would speak the language that these other youths spoke. And he found that they had something in common. Guess what that was? But what made them speak in this language? Why would you find that youths from a wide geographical dispersal, yeah, would speak similarly? Not social media. What else could, like, if you think about education, what could have happened to them educationally that would have them all having a common bond?
They all follow the same lesson structure, and all schools are kind of connected.
Well, do you think they'd be allowed to be able to speak like that in the schools? No.
That's what makes them want to do it.
So what? But what? If they're not speaking it in school, what might have happened to their schooling? What happens to certain children that schools? What happens to? I mean, you wouldn't know about this because it doesn't happen here, really. But what happens in state schools when a child has broken every rule so many times? And that's what Drummond began to find. He went round, basically, because obviously children that have been excluded, they've got to go somewhere. And so they've gone under a variety of names. Sorry? Yeah, well, you used to get exclusion units and things like this, which is in catchment areas, and that's where all these kids would end up, and they were regarded as being kind of unteachable because they had all sorts of issues, you know, that they were at them. Anyway, what Drummond found, and he did his initial research in Manchester, and he went around a couple of exclusion units in Manchester. And he was up front with these kids. He said he was in to do a language study. That he was, you know, he's a bona fide sort of professor from Manchester University. He said he was intrigued about the way that they spoke, and he explained. He said he had a feeling that the way that they spoke was going to be replicated elsewhere in the country, and he had an idea about why this was happening. And so he did interviews with them and spoke to them about it, and so he managed to get to have, you know, discussions with some of them, and he began to find out that the way that they spoke, it was because they felt excluded as such, and that they didn't have a place in society, and so they then used language to reflect them. It was the language of the kind of almost like the dispossessed in that respect, and once he'd got that sort of bit of data to back up his ideas, he then did the exact same thing coming down to London. I forget where else he went. I think he went further north as well, maybe up like Leeds way or whatever. And again, he went to the exclusion units, and he found that they all had similar speech patterns. And the thing that was in common was that they were out of mainstream education. And so he said, right, here is a bond, there's a link, and he said, and that's when he made that connection. That right, you could take them and you could drop them into any major city, and they'll fit in, they'll be able to speak the language because they've all been through that similar experience. And remember, we go back to the beginning of the course, we talked about covert prestige and overt prestige. This very neatly falls into both categories because it's one, they're using it in one way to give themselves a bit of status. You know, this is our language, you don't get it, you don't understand us, but we do, and you're not part of our gang. And it's also, it's to make them feel excluded, everybody else. And so it's that sort of reverse psychology that's been applied to them. And so we see these sorts of things happening. And again, incredible when you think about it, but you think it makes so much what do we call it, sense when you go through it.
That also proves the point though, that not necessarily from a language point of view, from like just a teaching point of view in general, that sometimes you just need to, rather than just, you know, like, oh, like you're not fit for this, like go away, you need to actually get to the bottom of why they're being like that and see how you can help them get out of that. And they all felt excluded.
Yeah.
Because the school just got whatever.
Yeah.
Which isn't really fair, is it?
Yeah, well, it's that whole thing. You're saying basically you're saying to them, you know, you are unteachable. Yeah. You know, and it's making that kind of subclass in its own way. What we then have, and again, just come back to what we're talking about, and this sort of taps into what you were saying as well, Oliver, about, you know, these, you know, different sort of native speakers and then fluent ones coming in, sort of thing. So you can see just down here. So in communities, there's often a rapid shift to the majority language by children of migrants, possibly accelerated by the fact that there are a large number of languages spoken in areas without strong residential segregation. And if you think about cities now, that is exactly what cities are, isn't it? We talk about these sort of cultural melting pots. You know, you go to places like Birmingham, Manchester, Liverpool, London, Coventry, these huge cities. And you have, I mean, again, you think about it abroad, isn't it? You know, like in New York, you've got the district of New York that's called Little Italy. You know, all that sort of thing. So it's those different communities all living side by side with each other. And it's no surprise that, you know, language is going to cross over. Yeah, it's not going to stay static to these areas. And then it's always going to be the young, it's always coming up, who are wanting to adapt, to change, to fit in more quickly than others, isn't it? So then they become a majority language speakers, maybe the minority in parts of these districts. The availability of local native models of majority language is weaker than elsewhere. This means that majority language may be acquired from second language speakers, and that's what we were just sort of talking about there, Oliver. So you imagine then, if we think about in our own situation, that Stuart becomes then a teacher of English to another Chinese student coming in. Yeah, so he doesn't get, that student doesn't get taught by another native speaker, but they get taught by Stuart. So Stuart's little personal tics and the way that he's learned English will get passed on, and it'll be taken as the norm. If you just then sort of, you know, you extrapolate that out, that is how the language evolves, change, adapts, and you come up with this sort of hybrid of what was once there. Yeah, that's it, exactly. You can, that is a very good concept. That is a very good concept. Well done. Round of applause. What can you do it in these COVID days?
We all sit next to each other like I'm dinner.
Do you? Do you really? Right. So, who's going to start then? No, you don't want. No, that would be a very unwise choice. I'll have a think about this. Think about this logically. Because what sort of sentence would Charlotte come up with, you know, to pass on to somebody? We all know, right? Somebody's going to have to start the Chinese whisper.
I think you should start. Actually, I think you should go in the middle because of the accent.
I should go in the middle because of my accent. Yeah. That's a bit. You know, hold on. That's, you know, someone.
You start. Oh, right. I can start. It's Chinese whispers.
Nobody's going to start.
I'm trying to think.
Hello. It's Penny. Penny's the person to start this. A Chinese whisper.
You don't need to record anymore.
I don't, do I? I can stop the recording now. That's true. Thank goodness, says Charlotte. Yeah. So yeah, I can stop that bit.
Chinese whispers, come on, man. It's not as if it's can't be.